To the left, we have the Samsung S90F. To the right, we have the Sony A8G Bravia Oled from 2019. Yeah, you heard that right. And what you're going to notice is how these TVs are holding up through the passage of time and whether or not it's time to upgrade. So the first thing I personally notice is, obviously, let's get this out of the way, the newer TV is just going to be brighter. That's one of the biggest things I noticed that is the hugest advantage, where I feel like if the A8G was a little bit brighter, we might actually have a lot more of a comparison conversation on our hands. However, that does not mean that it's a bad looking TV. I've noticed in a lot of examples, the Sony is actually holding its own with some beautiful color. Now, that being said, the color advantage in a lot of ways does go towards the Sony, or rather the Samsung S90F to the left, but there is an undeniable level of depth for sure on the Sony. And it's hard because I really feel like if it would have had a little more brightness, I truly feel like it probably would have ended up beating the S90F in a lot of examples. Not overall, but in a lot more examples. Now, it being dimmer, that does hurt its chances of doing that, albeit the contrast is undeniable. Like in this scene, the blacks are a little lifted to my naked eye on the S90F, where the A8G Bravia Oled is looking a lot better, and I mean a lot better. Now, in this example, this is where the S90F truly shines through. You see contrast, you see clarity, you see color. It's got all three, really, and black levels, so really, let's say 4. And it's knocking picture quality out of the park, where, again, we can give contrast and clarity, and depth, but it really is lacking in that brightness and ultimately that color comparatively to what we're getting on the step-up Quantum.OLED model. Same holds true for a situation like this, where there's a bright explosion. You clearly see that nice highlight on his face here on the, again, Samsung S90F to the left. Now, again, regardless of what you pick, I think it's important to understand that times have changed, right? And WOLED is on the out for a reason, and that reason is simply put, it doesn't have the same level of color throw that we have on QD OLED. But that does not mean, hear this, that does not mean there are some examples that can't be competitive, to say the least. And this also, as really messed up as it's gonna sound, really shows how little they did this year on the Samsung S90F, in my opinion, because when you really take a look at this should be a total bodying, absolute slaying for the brand new model. But look at what the X1 Extreme chip from 2019 is still doing. You have all this richness and this three-dimensional depth where the picture literally feels like it's leaping out at you, giving you that three-dimensionality that Samsung's not giving you. Also, highlight control is beautiful, so while it doesn't have a lot of brightness, I feel as though they are using what little they have fairly well. Obviously, that highlight is just to die for over that dim highlight there. I mean, come on. But we can kind of look at this picture, even in this example, and no, it doesn't have the brightness, but for color, I'd say they're a pretty damn good match right now. And this is where I get my mind blown. I'm just sitting here like, this is an older Sony. Like, this is 2019. And you're seeing again Samsung's 2025 Quantum.OLED. Can it beat a WOLED Sony A8G Bravia Oled? I mean, look at these two images right now. I mean, yes, one image, like the one to the left, it's brighter. And as a result of being brighter, the colors present brighter and a little bit more vibrantly. But does that mean that what I'm seeing to the right is so terrible that I have to throw it in the trash and run out to buy the new one? I would say if you're a brightness buff, absolutely. There's no two ways about it. Throw it in the trash and upgrade. It's time to upgrade because the brightness is just dated on the A8G Bravia Oled. Past that, I would say if you like primary colors, get the newer model as well. But not every example is going to be a slam dunk. Now, in this example, I don't know what YouTube's going to show you. It's clearly the Samsung S90F that is destroying the A8G to the right. When we talk about brightness again, you're seeing a theme here, but that adds to a level of contrast as well, and that leads to some really unique and very fun imagery that just draws you in immediately. And I mean like instantaneously, your eyes gravitate to the Samsung, say that's a better looking picture, where the Sony is just behind. It's a little dimmer, but it has hella detail. And I think everybody knows Sony has great detail. At this point, we're not really arguing that. We're arguing, is it time for you to throw away your older TV? And I don't know. I don't think I'm quite sold on everything that Quantum Dot OLED has to offer this year on at least the S90F, and here's why. I mean, the contrast obviously took a massive hit. That I already knew. But when you really pay attention to the details, and I mean really pay attention, the Sony in every aspect of the word has more detail in this image. I mean, I can't say that it doesn't. It's like literally 3D without 3D glasses and then 2D. That's how flat it looks. Don't get me wrong. This pink little light here is way brighter, and it's probably the instant thing you're gonna look at. The fire in the background, way brighter on the Samsung. Obviously, it looks great. The hair is more vibrant in everything. Yes, it's vibrant, but I still think that the detail the Sony is kicking out is monstrous. And I mean monstrous to the point where it's like, why would you even second guess it? I don't know. Now, in an example like this, it's pretty much like a slaughter fest for the Samsung against the Sony. When we look at things like the brightness of the captions, we look at, again, the really beautiful highlights that happen and occur right here. And again, it just has a general more colorful, more vivid feeling. Now, if you remember what I told you in the prior video, even though it's really bright, right now we have it maxed out. You do not have to do it that way. And I found if you just lower brightness, let's say to even 42 or 40, 41, I'd say 40 all the way to like 42, right? I'll go in the middle at 41. You do that, it still looks gorgeous with a ton of contrast on the Samsung. So you can lower brightness and get a little bit more contrast, pushing it into that Sony territory as far as detail goes, but Sony can never get brighter or more colorful. I mean, just look at how washed and dead it looks right here in this particular example, and that's why I would say for color and brightness alone, it's time to go QD OLED, and that's why I personally have made the leap and why this TV ultimately sits in my closet year-round, collecting dust for comparisons. Because the truth is, when you really get down to it, Sony has amazing detail, but that brightness on the A8G is just not enough to justify, you know, holding on to it as the only TV. Now, that being said, it has tremendous detail, as you can clearly see in this example. Very clear, very detailed. I don't think, like, as far as detail goes, if we're talking about processing, these two are exactly more or less the same. Like in this example, the Samsung does take the edge in clarity a bit, and you're gonna go back and forth depending on what you're watching. Like again, they look very, very similar right now. Tell me they don't. And that also is gonna probably bug some people because they're like, why is an old Sony OLED competing so well against a brand new QD OLED? And I mean, it's not beating it, but it's pretty damn competent, I'll say that. And again, I don't like WOLED technology because of the issues of a lack of vibrancy, the brighter it gets and so on and so forth. And I don't like the way that, again, reds don't really look red. They look a blood orange, which is where quantum dots make that massive difference for those primaries, which is why it was such a big deal when Sony went QD OLED, because Sony, with their picture processing and QD, quantum dots behind their panel, is just another level if they could get it right. Now, lately, Sony has been on the trend of cooling off or chilling off their image or their color temperature or color tone, whatever you want to call it, to make it look more blue. And that's where Sony's failing nowadays. They're not making TVs like this anymore. This was like a champion of champions of champions of champions. Because here it is in 2025, and look at it comparatively to QD OLED. Tell me I'm wrong. I mean, good luck. You could see pretty much identical detail. The Sony, albeit, looks way more three-dimensional. And you could probably even see this on camera. If you pay attention to like the bright highlight part here, it's more hazy. Where this, it gives you the highlight, but it's really detailed and really three-dimensional. So like that object-based HDR remaster Again, turning SDR into HDR-like content really holds truer on a Sony than it does on a Samsung. And again, a Sony from like 2019. So even though Samsung has like their auto HDR remaster and real depth enhancer and all that crap, I mean, only one is really giving me that image where I truly feel like we're actually getting really three-dimensional and very rich, like really, really rich contrast. Don't get me wrong, there's a bunch of contrast on the Samsung, but you gotta have bright scenes like what's on the screen right now. Obviously, the image to the left, way better than anything the image to the right is doing. Again, it depends on what you're looking at though, because now we look at it and they look identical with a slight lean towards the Sony contrast, because I could see all the bokeh light and everything in the background. It just looks good. I just wish I could pump that brightness just a little bit higher. If I could, it would be game over right now. Like, it really would be, as far as that scene goes. But then I look at scenes like this, right? And so as I'm looking at a scene like this, the first thing I notice is like the green on Tanjiro's jacket to the left, way more poppin' for sure on the Samsung. But then I look over and I'm like, every other detail though comes through on the Sony like really strong. And that's where we have our conversation here. This year, unfortunately, brightness is a hindrance for the detail, for the contrast, and I wish that weren't the case, but that is. And so we have to be honest about that, but I want you to see how close they look. Like, truly, like how close they look. Match for match, like for like. Both of these are optimized using my settings. They are not in default. If we were to do a default comparison, it would be game over already, like literally already. And again, just to give you an idea of what I'm talking about, I mean, like in this example, yeah, sure, with my settings, the Samsung pulls ahead in terms of brightness, not in terms of, obviously, the accuracy of color and that cinematic feeling. That is going to Sony every day. But, again, I'll show you in real time here, just so you can see it, because, you know, not everybody does these kinds of comparisons with older TVs. And I think they're very important to establish if you should upgrade or not. So what we're going to do is show you the movie mode and show you that is where you started, that is where you finish. If you were to compare with that, obviously, you could clearly see how that would not get the job done at all comparatively to that. Now, again, I'll even go a step further and say we're going to go to, like, let's say dynamic mode. This is their retail mode, and it still looks horrible comparatively to the Sony, again, from 2019. Or let's say just standard, without being calibrated. Just a standard mode that everybody gets. We're going to select that one. No calibration, no adjustments at all outside of what they give you. And that, my friends, is what it looks like. So if you don't use my settings, or you don't hire a calibrator, or have a tremendously extensive amount of knowledge to know how to get the picture you want, you're never going to see what I'm talking about. I say this in almost every comparison video to really drive home the fact that my settings are what's making the difference in these comparisons, to help you be able to see what we have over here, where it's just a world of color that would not have been possible without my setup. Now, we're going to go back into my settings to show you, you can go from this back to that. It's a big difference for sure from that to that. Also, if we look at filmmaker mode, this is the best that they're going to give you, right? I'll go ahead and select filmmaker mode, and you decide comparatively to my Sony, the most accurate that they could do. Again, I want you to understand that the whole idea with these are they're Pantone validated for skin tone accuracy and so on and so forth, reference accuracy, blah, 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 blah. Well, check that out versus my adjustments, and you can see my optimizations don't play. If you were to compare QD OLED out of the box in filmmaker mode, their most accurate, the W OLED would trounce it. And I need you to understand this. You are not ever, not sometimes, not maybe, not a little, you are not ever going to see a picture quality on the W OLED, or rather the QD OLED, that is going to beat anything I've done on the A8G with my settings, and it's a W OLED. Now, hypothetically speaking, it should be way more amazing, way more over the top, you know what I mean? And it's not, because out of the box, they don't make the TVs look that good. Now, to show you what it looks like when you do have those settings, now that you've seen a couple images where, again, this is what you're gonna get when you pay for it, but if you join for $5, basically, $4.99, you can literally get an image that goes from that trash back to this. That is literally a day and night difference in terms of brightness, quality, clarity, everything. And now we have an image that beats the Sony in some very key areas. However, I will give a note to the Sony. Sony is just catching my eye in terms of like pure, raw, unadulterated detail. Like, that's all I could say about Sony right now. Like, I see every little effect, every little particle. It's gorgeous. Where that is a little brighter. I mean, that, unfortunately, that is a little bit brighter than I would want it to be. I mean, it's gorgeous, it's vibrant, and it definitely catches your eye instantly. But then you really like put on your like big boy analysis glasses, right? And you start looking and you're like, no, some special shit's happening over there on that Sony for sure. And this is, it blows my mind to see, look at this image, for example. Tell me which one is the QD OLED in this example. This is where officially I would throw my hands up in the air and say, I can't. If I walked into a blind test, only reason I would know one would be a QD OLED over another is the QD OLED is brighter, so I would look for the brighter highlights. Outside of that, you would have virtually no way of telling because of how detailed and how crisp and how amazing this Sony from 2019 still looks in 2025. And this is why I do these comparisons to show you, do you really need to upgrade? Or are you reading a lot of the marketing jargon that they've put out on these products a little too much? Because don't get me wrong, they can sell the shit out of some stuff, but what they don't tell you, proper cyan, real cinematic cyan versus just a flat shade of blue. What they don't tell you, highlights, yes, we're a brighter TV, but occasionally we're gonna blow out some faces here and there versus Sony, who's gonna preserve those details and give you that richness. Again, there's a Sony tax for a reason. Anybody saying that it doesn't exist for a particular reason, at least from the 2019 batch of TVs, is lying to you, because there's totally a reason. I mean, I'm looking at the detail right now. It's crisp, it's clean. I mean, look at the colors. It is a TV from 2019 to 2025, and I'm looking at this and I'm like, dude, like 2025 actually is having a TV from ages ago hold its own. And I mean, I don't know what to say to that. What do you say to that? I'm looking at it with my naked eye going back and forth. I'm blown away by how close they are, by the way. I'm like, holy shit, man. Like, they're actually really close. I mean, look at this example. Find me the QD OLED. I dare you. I dare you to find it. Yeah, sure, if you know a little bit about TVs, you know, QD OLED's gonna be brighter. So what are you gonna see? You're gonna see brighter highlights and everything. Fantastic. But detail-wise, which one has the better detail? I mean, Sony is just doing something magical here. And that's what I love. This is the Sony that I love. The one that can really hold its own with the QD OLED and really give people argument or a reason for existence past what we had in the past. Because when you look at how cinematically gorgeous this scene is. I mean, and gorgeous is the only way. By the way, it has details that the Samsung just doesn't have. So while yes, Samsung does have that extra warmth right here from the train's light, which is missing here on the Sony, totally going to give them the credit for that, because that's amazing, and that is also very beautifully cinematic. They are lacking that detail and depth and the water effects and also the rich cyan that's supposed to be around it that gives you that cinematic feel, that cinematic kind of fog to it almost. It's a different beast. Now, of course, I would have to say that if I were to pick a winner, it would have to be the Samsung, because the next generation vibrancy and brightness are enough to make almost anyone with a dimmer TV that doesn't have a dark room jump ship, for sure. However, if you're not somebody that has like a really bright room and you mostly watch in a dark room at nighttime, I mean, you're going to be good with your Sony. You're going to be good with your older, dimmer TV. It's kind of like saying like you have a plasma and you need to upgrade. No, you don't. Not really. There's not, you know what I mean? Like, yeah, there are some color differences that happen here and there, but if you like what you like and you know it looks good, it looks good. I mean, in this example, I don't know what YouTube's going to show you. I prefer, personally, the look of the Sony all day, every day, because you can't see this, but it preserves red skin tones in her face and gives warmth that just isn't present on the Samsung, albeit Samsung counteractively has the warmer shade of purple that's more accurate, and this is where quantum dots come into play. So again, Sony with skin tones, them with the vibrancy of like colors like purple. It's weird like that. You know what I mean? And this is where you'll find yourself going back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. But ultimately it boils down to this. A TV from 2019 is punching right back at a TV from 2025 that has seen so much new technology thrown at it, it'd give you a heart attack. Again, is it going to give you the same level of reds? And this is what I mean when I say reds are just hitting different on the newer TVs. Like that red over there is magical. It trances you. It brings you in. It makes you feel something. That red over there is, it's a moment. It's all right. But you can forget it instantly. And that's one thing that, like, for me, like in a scene like this, that red catches my eye instantly, and it's a bold statement. She's in the red light district. She's Daki. She's, you know what I mean? She's the demon, upper rank demon. She's that chick. And you feel that moment a lot better with the highlights and the brightness right here than you do on the Sony. Sony now completely trounced in almost every way possible. So again, I'm not saying that Samsung doesn't have moments where it beats the Sony dramatically, because it totally does, and you are clearly seeing it. But counteractively, you are seeing plenty of moments where, again, Sony still, after all this time, is holding its damn own in a very impressive way. I mean, just look at the fact that Samsung tends to over-brighten things. If you look at Inosuke's mask, it's kind of over-brightened, where this is retaining a lot of that darker color and a lot more richness in those flowers back there, where that's a little brighter, but it still looks good too. You don't have as bright as a highlight in the hallway, right? That's obviously a really bright highlight. That's dim by comparison, but detail-wise, they both look exceptionally immaculate, frankly. I mean, if we're calling it what it is. That has better warm tones and colors here, so this is going to be a win right here. And you can play this with literally every scene and wind up with the same conclusion. And I want to do more of a comparison between these two, because I feel like even just this one image showing you the difference in color and everything isn't really going to do it justice. So if you want to see more of this comparison, let me know, because I honestly feel like 20 minutes just isn't enough to get out what I have to say. I will give a winner, and the winner is going to ultimately be the Samsung S90F, albeit I would say that the Sony is no slouch, and if you have it, and you've held on to it for years, you've got a great TV, and you've got absolutely nothing to really be worrying about or to really want to upgrade from, so long as you're in a dark room. But if you are in a brighter room, that's where a lot more of those problems that we don't want are going to trickle in, because again, that's where you're going to start to see a lot more, and I mean a lot more, of the dim nature of the Sony come into play. And again, to round it off, I'll just show you that by hitting on the light here. Okay, and you can clearly see now with the lights on. I'm going to go ahead and turn on a couple more lights. Again, just to give you a real world idea. Again, in real time, go turn on some lights. Okay, now we got some lights on. You can clearly see. I'll even hit the studio light and everything. Okay, so now with some lights on, you can see where Sony kinda is falling behind, but you can also clearly see that it doesn't have the lifted blacks that the Samsung has. So is it dimmer? Fuck yeah, it is. But I kind of like that though, I'm not gonna lie, I dig it. Because that dimness, for whatever reason, whatever coating Sony put on there, it works. It works really well, and it gives a very beautiful presentation. Albeit, you are going to run into the better, brighter TV being, no shit, the Samsung S90F. And you're clearly seeing it here. But that contrast on the Sony is still to die for, which makes me say it's so fucking crazy, dude. Look at this. I want to end this video, but I'm telling you, 20 minutes is not enough to do a comparison between these two, because there are so many other examples with so many other content pieces I could show you that would be like crazy as fuck. And I want to do that, but again, if you want to see that, let me know by saying we're part 2 in the comments down below, and we'll do a part 2 for sure. Otherwise, I'm going to call it for the Samsung S90F, while giving that lean towards that Sony and saying, this is one hell of a fucking TV, and if you have it, you are absolutely lucky for having that. But that being said, I want to thank you guys so much for watching the #1 brand in honesty and just looking at all of the content that I've shown right here. And let me know what you guys think about it. Do you guys think the Samsung is the winner hands down and that the Sony just can't compete in any way, shape, and or form? Because I'm not gonna lie, in this example, I think Sony is right there on Samsung's heels, even though it's old and even though it's not QD OLED and even though it's not as bright. So it's really hard, but I think you guys can see what I see. So let me know what you guys think, and until the next video, I'll see you guys later.